Ooh.
Saints Row. Known by many as a poor man's Grand Theft Auto, this is the very first game in the Saints Row franchise, and marks the beginning of a series I hold close to my heart. It was originally developed under the codename Bling Bling, and intended for release on the PlayStation 2. Saints Row ended up as an early Xbox 360 title instead. So why am I talking about Saints Row? Well, it is one of my favourite franchises. That isn't the only reason though. Saints Row has undergone such a transformation over the course of its 4 main games. I mean, how does this become this? From tongue-in-cheek crime simulator to futuristic science fiction starring the President of the United States. A lot of people blame it entirely on the third game in the series, which took a massive leap into the realms of obscenity and madness. But it cannot all be blamed on the third game, as even the very first game was finely spliced with humour and obscenity.
I'm gonna skull fuck that bitch.
Hope you don't mind hepatitis.
What?
Because of the time of its release, and its development period, Saints Row is an artifact of the generation prior to its release. It is also a game with such potential and ambition, lost either through the transfer process, or quite simply because the developers were unfamiliar with the hardware it was destined for. Saints Row is similar to Grand Theft Auto in quite a few ways. It's a game about climbing the crime ladder, and much like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, it is about becoming a bigger force within the gang, and eventually becoming their effective leader in the process. But there are areas in which Saints Row is very different to Grand Theft Auto. For starters, in not a single Grand Theft Auto game have you been required to earn the right to undertake missions, as I'll go into in a moment. Also, the Grand Theft Auto games did not have an on-screen GPS until the 4th game. Who did it first? Saints Row. Taking on 3 gangs at once is something I've never seen in a Grand Theft Auto game. At least, not handled in the same way. Perhaps the most standout part of the Saints Row series, or at least especially the first 2 games, is the story. In the very first installment, the story focuses on an unnamed protagonist who is almost killed in the midst of a gang war. He is rescued by Julius Little, leader of the 3rd Street Saints. After being inducted into the Saints, the protagonist has to earn respect within the gang and ultimately help the gang topple the other 3 main gangs: the Vice Kings, the West Side Rollers, with a Z on the end instead of an S, and the Los Carnales.
The Carnales.
What?
Rio Grande River. Jesus.
What the fuck?
It's not the Los Carnales, it's just the Carnales. Los means... fuck it.
The protagonist has to assist in taking down these gangs and reclaim the Row, after which some more things happen. We will delve into spoiler territory, so keep that in mind. We'll also recap the entire story too. I wouldn't dare ask you or expect you to play through the original Saints Row nowadays. It's so ass backward. To partake in missions, the player must have enough respect. This is one of the few parts of Saints Row that I just cannot stand. To earn respect, the protagonist must take part in activities such as insurance fraud, drug trafficking, and hijacking. It makes sense. You don't just go from initiate to gang leader in a fortnight without shifting some of your weight. But it's also a slow process, and if you fail an activity, you have to drive all the way back to the activity location to try again. Where's the retry option? Missions have a retry option, so why not the activities? To earn more respect from activities, up to a 25% boost. The protagonist is required to wear purple clothing and expensive jewellery. By which time, Your character does not resemble anything you want him to be. Instead, clad in boring purple clothes and jewellery and tattoos just to squeeze that extra respect out of each activity. I'll go into more detail about the activities and diversions themselves another time. The series has always had these activities and diversions play a large role in the game progression, and it makes sense to tackle them as a whole rather than spend any more of this video talking about them. I will say in passing that the activities in the first Saints Row game are hardly interesting or enjoyable. Besides mayhem, which is immensely satisfying, the other activities are just short of being fun in any capacity. Luckily, the protagonist isn't forced to play every activity. As long as you're decked out in gems, tats, and purple doos, you're going to need to play fewer of them. Once you have enough arbitrary respect points, you can undertake missions. Each of the lieutenants within the 3rd Street Saints are assigned to bringing down a particular gang, and the protagonist is tasked with assisting that lieutenant. While I talk through these in the order I played them, the gangs can actually be taken in any order. The Vice Kings are being taken out by Johnny Gat. Johnny Gat has always been my favourite member of the Saints. The narcissism runs deep with Gat.
You don't look like much. Then again, I don't look like I have an 8-inch cock, so I guess we're both full of surprises.
He loves himself, and he thinks the sun shines out of his own arse. However, the reality is he's actually got the skills to back these claims up. More gung-ho than the rest of the Saints put together, Johnny's plan usually consists of causing the biggest explosion possible.
Now,
Don't worry, Dex. I have something more subtle in mind.
Johnny, you can't be serious.
Fuck yeah, I am!
This isn't gonna end well.
This resonates well with the protagonist, who shares the same bloodlust. Over the course of the series, the protagonist becomes a complete sociopath, and I'm sure a lot of that is down to the influence of Johnny Gat. The Vice Kings, they effectively rule the city of Stillwater. Their leader is Benjamin King, and Julius tells stories about him as though he were an idol of his. The two of them actually share history, growing up together in a gang many years ago. To take out the Vice Kings, Johnny Gat suggests first rescuing the sister of his love interest Aisha. Aisha's sister was kidnapped by members of the Vice Kings.
Some motherfuckers grabbed Aisha's sister right off the street.
Shit, man. That's the 6th girl this month. We know who's doing this?
Yeah, Vice Kings.
After rescuing Aisha's sister, the Saints plan their revenge. Because Aisha is a member of a record studio owned by Vice King's Lieutenant Warren Williams, the Saints fake Aisha's death with a car explosion, which also damages the recording studio. The Saints retaliate further by attacking the Vice King's operations in the nearby vicinity, including a brothel owned by Tanya Winters.
So I'm thinking, we put the hurt on Tanya, we're fucking up the Vice Kings. She's got an operation in Prong Court. That's where we'll start.
They then go after Tanya herself, but in a turn for the worse, Johnny ends up getting captured by Vice King's Lieutenant Anthony Green.
I thought I told you to be quiet.
I got shitty hearing.
Now you got a shitty leg.
So do you.
After the protagonist rescues Johnny and terminates Anthony Green, 3rd Street Saints Lieutenant Dex discovers that the Vice Kings have an agreement with the police, and that's why they were able to get such a grip on the city. Dex suggests that Johnny and the protagonist dress up as Vice Kings and test just how far their agreement with City Hall goes.
Put these on.
I'm yellow enough as it is, Dex.
Just put the damn shirt on.
Fine. Get dressed. We got a little piece to disturb.
Which results in Vice King's leader Benjamin King having to explain his gang's actions to Mayor Hughes. Tanya and Warren stage a coup, and Benjamin King is rescued by the Saints. With Ben's knowledge of the Vice King's operations, he reluctantly assists the Saints in eradicating the Vice Kings and dismantling their remaining operations.
I ain't walking away until I deal with Tanya. My nigga. Johnny, put the damn gun down.
This is easily my favourite mission string in the game, apart from a few difficult moments, like dangling Tanya's stylist from the window to get him to divulge information. The missions are relatively interesting, and the gang leader Benjamin King is actually quite terrifying.
So how about you put your dick away, pick up your gun, and try to keep your knee away from the bullets?
Michael Clark Duncan provided one of his strongest performances, I feel, in the shoes of Benjamin King, and it really stands out as my favourite mission string for that reason. and also because of Johnny Gat. The second gang terrorizing the streets of Stillwater are the West Side Rollers. The Rollers deal almost exclusively in expensive cars and run the city's street racing circuits. The 3rd Street lieutenant tasked with their demolition is Lin, the self-professed best racer to come out of Chinatown.
How come I've never heard of you?
'Cause I got tits.
Is that what you call those?
Taking down the West Side Rollers starts with stealing a shipment of state-of-the-art sports cars.
The only interesting news I got is that a shipment of high-performance cars is coming in today. It's not much, I know, so we're gonna make the best of it. Jack the truck carrying the cars before it makes its delivery and take it to Sampson. He'll load up the cars with a few surprises, then finish the delivery.
The cars are then rigged with explosives and used to great effect in a street race, which takes out a large number of main players in the Rollers. The protagonist then helps Lin form a relationship with Rollers mechanic Donnie. Lin uses that relationship to rat out several of the Rollers' plans to the protagonist, but the scheme is ultimately foiled.
I'll handle this. I don't give a shit what you do to Lynn, but you better not hurt Donnie.
Lin is killed by West Side Rollers associate William Sharp in a direct follow-up mission, the only one of its kind in the whole game. The protagonist survives the assassination attempt, seeks out William Sharp, and kills him. This draws out West Side Rollers leader Joseph Price, who is killed in a high-speed car chase across the freeway. Donnie gets away, but it's not the last we'll see of him.
You okay, Blair?
I got ran over by a motherfucking truck. What do you think?
Oh, quit being a bitch.
I did not enjoy the West Side Rollers mission string too much. Particularly, a mission where convoys have to be intercepted before the Rollers reach them is brutal. It requires much luck and perseverance, as well as elite driving skill, to take out the final group of Rollers before the last convoy is destroyed. I remember this mission specifically as where I gave up the last 3 times I tried to play Saints Row. This time I pulled through, just to see how it all ends. It was tiring and soul-crushing, and I really needed a moment to calm down afterwards. The remaining gang is the Carnales, who deal with the drug side of things. The string begins as Dex informs the protagonist that the Carnales have meth laboratories in the city.
We cut off their income first, then we go for Hector. Sound good? That was a rhetorical question, but thanks for your support.
After destroying a few, the Saints proceed to steal a shipment of drugs from the Carnales. In retaliation, the Carnales attack the row directly. In direct retaliation to that retaliation, the Saints kill off Carnales Lieutenant Hector and bust up their new delivery. But someone tipped off the police, and ultimately, the stolen drugs were taken away before the Saints could grab them for themselves. The Saints commandeer the drugs back from Stillwater Police Department. The Saints then head after Lieutenant Angelo. Eventually, he is tracked down to the airport and disposed of. This mission string wouldn't be so dreadful if it wasn't for the marginally impossible final mission, where the protagonist is required to take out RPG-wielding gang members to protect Dex's car. I didn't like this mission because it required superhuman reaction speeds, and it also felt as though it was difficult through lack of real difficulty, and instead through artificial means. Don't let the credits fool you. After all the gang activity has been finished, the protagonist receives a phone call from Chief Monroe of the Stillwater Police Department. The protagonist is forced into killing mayoral candidate Winslow. It is part of a deal to get Julius returned, who has been kidnapped by Chief Monroe. The Saints, not happy with being played for fools, attack Chief Monroe directly at Winslow's funeral procession. The protagonist then receives a phone call from Mayor Alderman Hughes, who invites the protagonist to a party on his yacht to congratulate him for taking out the opposing gangs, Winslow and Monroe, the people who were stopping him from having any chance of getting into power again. Hughes reveals that he is going to kill the protagonist there and then, and take over the city as its rightful ruler. Julius watches from the nearby waterfront, and then looks at his watch. He walks away. No more than a few seconds later, the yacht is blown to smithereens by a bomb, and everybody on board is killed. Julius had been working with the Stillwater Police Department since his capture, in order to earn himself a complete pardon and to disband the 3rd Street Saints. He organised the bomb explosion on the yacht so that all gang operations could be peacefully resolved, and so that he could avoid life sentencing by Troy. That's right, Troy, having been an undercover cop working with the 3rd Street Saints, did everything he could to get a pardon for the gang's actions. To Julius and Troy, the death of the protagonist seemed like a fair loss in exchange for the good that they were ultimately trying to achieve. So you're screwed over by everyone you've ever trusted, except Johnny, because he's cool. The man who saved you on that street corner, Julius, just made an attempt on your life. And you're waking up in prison with severe reconstruction work needed after a 5-year coma. The first thing on your mind is revenge. You want your power back. That is where the protagonist finds himself at the start of Saints Row 2. While the oddball humour and incredible writing quality are present from the very first game in the series, the events of the game still feel grounded within reality to a certain extent. This is far from wielding superpowers and taking on an evil version of Santa Claus, but the basis for the absurdity is still present. Many blame the 3rd game for the absurdity and obscenity, but you could argue it's present here. Whether or not you think so, it cannot be denied that Saints Row 2 followed up with more madness, more stupidity, and more filth.
This is the McManus. As you see, it's fully collapsible and comes in a stately black attaché. The 18-inch cryogenically treated stainless steel bull barrel gives this rifle a guaranteed accuracy of .2 minute of angle at 600 yards with match-grade ammunition. With its hand-reamed chamber and match-grade trigger, the McManus is designed for the marksman who wants to reach out and touch someone at a moment's notice.
I'll take it.
Lovely. Would you like a gift wrap?
Ooh.